Please state for me your name and spell it.
Right, it's Kyra Logsdon, which is Kyra Logsdon.
Tell us where you work and your job title.
Okay, so I work at Griffith Centers for Children as a clinical supervisor and a mental health therapist. And I also just opened a private practice called Creative Directions Counseling and Consulting. So I'm the owner of that as well.
Tell me about an average day pre-pandemic.
Okay. With Griffith, an average day is really providing clinical supervision to the clinicians that I oversee. I also manage the intern program. So I have probably about 4 interns and 5 clinicians that I oversee. So meetings, consistent communication, and then in addition, I'm also a therapist. So not only working with the clinicians, but also the schools, the county, that kind of stuff. A lot of what I did as a therapist was in the schools, so it was very consistent communication and in-person consultation.
And how has your average day changed now that we're under the stay-at-home order and now under the safer at home?
Yes. So it's been pretty significant. Clinicians and the clinical supervisor piece hasn't been too different because that was pretty easy to switch over to doing it like by Zoom or by phone. It has certainly changed the purpose of those supervisions, and now it's more focused on like therapeutic techniques and how to use those online. As a therapist, though, it's been very significant. I work with kids, generally speaking, under the age of 12. So I have clients between the age of 5 and 12. So switching to an online platform for like my 5-year-olds has been very challenging. And then also not getting that consistent communication with the schools. So instead of it being every day or a couple times a week, it's maybe once a month.
So explain more about your role in the school.
So as I kind of play a dual role, I guess. So I'm in there as a therapist working with my clients, but then also, I guess, marketing, but also just making sure that everything that we're providing and that we are continuing that coordination of care with the schools is sufficient with all of our clinicians. So most of the time, like I would communicate with like the teachers or the counselors or the principals. I'm pretty close with most of the schools, specifically elementary. So that has been the biggest challenge, I think, in not being able to support the schools the same as we would before.
How does how is it that you would come to have a work with the child in a school? I mean,
like process?
Yeah, like how do you actually connect with the kid? Does the school say they need, we see some behaviors, or the child reaches out, or there's an incident? I mean, how does that all happen?
Okay, so generally speaking, like the school would send a referral, and then we would obviously complete the intake, meet with the school to see exactly what's going on. A lot of it is behavior focused, which is why we are in such constant communication. Also, if there is a significant event that occurs, then the clinician would also be contacted to see if they could do kind of an more immediate or unscheduled session at the school. So the schools have been really great in that context, that we actually get to provide therapy during school hours at the school. So like my process specifically is I would go to the school and I would meet with whoever. Most of the time I work with significant needs and behaviors. So I would meet with that teacher and just kind of follow up on what's been going on, what are some of the issues that they've seen over the past week. And then I'd meet with the client, do, whatever therapy needs to be done. And then at the end of that, I would communicate with them again and say, these are some of the things that we tried. Try these over the next week. So a lot of that coordination of, this is what I see working, try it this week and we'll see if it helps.
Do you get involved a lot with the parents?
Yes. So the parents as well. And it's the same thing. Like we would contact the parents really at least once a week. Most of the time it was for like phone calls, but then also we do family therapy sessions. So for my younger kids, it's more family focused than it is individual with the client, right? So for a 5-year-old, it's really important that teacher and that parent are following the same guidelines and they're doing the same things. And most of those ones are really interactive. And so switching that to the online format is pretty significant.
How do you do that?
It's a lot of research. I will say that the good thing I think that's come from this is my toolbox has significantly increased, right? Because now, but then also I'm a play therapist, and so I'm very experiential. So when we're in a session together, there's a lot of contact, there's a lot of like toys, there's a lot of just different things. So then switching that to online has been interesting.
Can those things still happen now? Or, I mean, were they totally shut down and now they're opening back up? Or I have no idea.
Yeah. So the other good thing I think that's come from this is there's a lot more parent involvement because there has to be. And so whereas before, maybe it was difficult to communicate with the parents, or they weren't available, or they didn't want to schedule sessions, now they have to be a part of it. And so it has kind of helped that piece of it. So instead of like me being there and providing like all the toys or all the materials or that kind of stuff, now it's on the parent to provide the materials if they can, of course. And so that's also been empowering, I think, for parents to take that as a responsibility. So yes, it can still happen. It just happens in a very different context. And then I think really being, I'm more non-direct because of the play therapy. So it's not direct of this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to talk about and this is how it's going to happen. It's more, we're going to come to the session, and whatever the kid is having a challenge with or the family is, then that's what we would talk about. Having it online, it has to be more direct. So there has to be a plan. It has to be more structured, which is challenging because now you have to find new tools. So instead of like bringing Uno, and I could bring Uno every single time and it would be a completely different session, I can't really bring Uno to an online session. So it's finding those things to keep them engaged and interactive and wanting to continue therapy. And also recognizing that these tools, they seem to go through much faster. So like Uno is kind of one of those things that doesn't ever die, right? I could bring it every time and it would be a different session. But with a certain intervention online, it's usually a one and done. It's not something that we can bring back every week because they've done it and they want to move on. So it's that constant, like finding something new every single week to do instead of being able to rely solely on the relationship piece.
Yeah, I could imagine if you were meeting with kids in school, it would be hard to get parents involved because it's easy to say, well, that happens at school.
Yep.
Are you at all allowed to meet in person right now with your kiddos?
So for both Creative Directions and Griffith Centers, it's a contract basis. And so we don't have employees, which means that the contractor can choose whether they're going to see somebody in person or they're going to see somebody online. So it is up to the contractor. So for those that are seeing clients in person, we just are making sure that we're following all the guidelines, obviously provided by the state and the CDC and the county and all that good stuff. And I think the hardest part with that is the masks, right? Because not every family has access to that, and also where you're going to see them. So seeing them in an office is not as good right now as seeing them outside, right? Just because of that increase. And then like really thinking about if you are seeing them in person, you have to maintain that 6-foot difference or distance. And it's hard to do like experiential stuff when you have to stay so far away.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, it's kind of that twofold of, is it easier to see them in person and maintain 6-foot difference, or is it easier to do it online and just work hard to make sure that you have what you need for each of those sessions? I can say all of the clinicians that I supervise are having that challenge.
I can imagine. Has COVID brought to light any like issues for kiddos?
Yeah.
Are there different like areas that you're focusing on now? You see changing because of, increased anxiety over COVID, or my mom's scared to leave the house, or I don't know.
Yeah. So I will say, I think for the older kids, more of like the preteen and teenagers and that kind of stuff, and young adults going, increasing in age, there is an increased level of anxiety that I've noticed. For younger kids, though, for elementary kids, it's been really interesting because they're playing outside more. So whereas I expected that they would just be playing video games all day, because, you get to stay home all day, why wouldn't you? I found that after the first week, they didn't want to. They wanted to be outside and they wanted to do this. And I think the video games for them at this point is really about that social connection that they're missing from school. But then also you see the kids that maybe have experienced bullying at school that aren't having those same experiences, so some of their anxiety has decreased. So it's been really interesting, and I think it's hard to say overall what's happening because it seems like every week there's something different. Like the first week was all almost like panic, right? I don't really know what's going on. Like, I'm just going to do something to fill my time, and parents were really struggling of, it's now my responsibility to keep them busy from 8 to 4, which is not reasonable, right? But that's the expectation that they set for themselves. And then as you see like time go by, they're accepting that they're not the teachers and that it's okay for them to do what they can and do the best that they can. And that's all that anybody can ask. And the same thing for the teachers, like switching over to doing online that first week was really challenging. And now everybody's kind of in a groove and they're getting it figured out. And I think the kids that like have struggled with homework and stuff like that before are doing really well, because what else do they have to do? So they're excited to get homework because it gives them something to work on, which I would not have expected. So,
can you talk about changes around telehealth, or if that's affected you in any way?
So luckily, we have always had the opportunity to do telehealth. So it's not that we had to set this up all of a sudden. This is something that we have had the opportunity to do before. And we've done, like, if clients go out of town for spring break or on like during summer, it's always been an option. So it's always been in place, which is really helpful. And like I said, I think moving clinicians to telehealth was really easy. And some clients, it was fairly easy. Really, the older clients were easy. I think the big challenge is who has access. And so do they have the ability to download the application? Do they have the internet to be able to connect? And if they don't, most of the population that we serve, it's not like they can go to McDonald's and use the Wi-Fi because they don't have a vehicle or they don't have transportation. And so it's really been difficult trying to figure out how to meet our clients' needs in a very different way. And some clinicians have been really creative in that they like have made care packages essentially, or like therapy packages, and they'll drop them off at the door, and then they'll let the parent know, like, hey, here's the kit, right? Or like I've sent some, like basically a list of, here's, how to make a therapy box at home, and this is what we'll use, which has been really good because parents have asked about that. So I think the hardest part is that, and the access, and then also the sessions don't last as long, not nearly as long. So if we were able to do maybe a 50-minute or 60-minute session in person, we're looking more at like 20 to 40 minutes, because it's just
hard to sit still, or
yeah, I think it's just hard to stay engaged when you don't have all of the body language, is what I kind of assume it is, or look at it like being in person. There is a lot of that communication that happens with body language, and there's also more things to use. But I do think that in general, kids get distracted more, and it's been across the board for every client that I have and every clinician that I supervise, that their sessions are significantly less, which is also interesting because they have more time during the week. So yes, we're having fewer sessions or shorter sessions, but we're having them more often. So it's interesting to see that too. I don't know.
That makes sense. When you're talking about, the access that people have, that plays right along in line with what I've heard from other people. I talked to a social worker and a doctor who were talking about, how health disparities, play a big part in what people have access to and the outcomes that they're going to find over time. Do you think that there's going to be some long-term, I don't know, what do you foresee in the future because of this time for people's mental health in general? If you want to even consider, someone who has access to healthcare versus someone who doesn't, or someone who has food instability, or someone who has, no internet. God, I could not imagine going through this without internet.
Right.
How spoiled am I?
Yeah. And I think the community, like Mesa County and our, Western Slope community, has done some really amazing things to help, like DHS, for example, with supervised parenting time. They have provided like tablets or laptops to their foster families, so they have access, so they can continue parenting time. Rocky Mountain Medicaid has allowed phone calls to be in place of Zoom if they don't have access to Zoom. So I think, and I know like Spectrum kind of did something with free internet, but there was a whole lot of strings attached to it, and so nobody was actually able to gain anything from that from our clients. But I think like people are kind of understanding in general, like, okay, in order for this to happen, this is what's missing. I do think though that, or at least I hope, this is going to increase the ability to receive therapy. Because I think a lot of people, and telehealth and teletherapy is not new, but it's a scary thing. It's different and it's strange. And you think of therapy, you think of going to an office and, sitting across from somebody and the whole nine. And I think this has kind of shaped that idea of you don't have to drive 30 minutes to see your therapist, right? Like that it really is more accessible than it seems. So I hope anyways that is going to continue. And I think providers in general have kind of decreased their need, we'll say, to do things in person. And so their schedules and their availability are a little bit different, because you don't have to count for 15 minutes to drive here, and then you do the thing, and then 15 minutes to drive back. And I can tell you, for me, like, I see clients in Palisade and I see clients in Fruta, and I have more time to do, like, to see more people, because I don't spend all that time driving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think providers are also realizing, like, hey, I can be just as effective and I can meet the needs of more people doing it this way.
Yeah.
And so I think that will kind of shift a little bit moving forward. But it'll be interesting. That's kind of my, like I said, my hope, or my assumption. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think having phone or Zoom technology kind of takes the stigma out of nobody's going to see me walking in to, Mind Springs over here.
Yeah.
If I need some mental health help. Can you talk to how do you think our community's response has been to COVID? I know Mesa County is opening up beyond, some of the rest of the state.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's a lot of really strong providers in the community, and it's been really fun and I don't know, inspiring, I guess, to be a part of those meetings. And where there may have, like, felt like there was some kind of competition, that doesn't exist right now, and that's really
Good.
cool. And I don't think it was really that we were competing. I think it was just that stigma of, you provide the same service, therefore you compete.
Yes.
But we don't. And so it's just been really cool to work with some of the bigger organizations, and how much we want to focus on, we are going to do what we're doing in the same way. So it's not like, oh, we want to go to this place because they're doing it differently, or this place because they're opening earlier. It's, we're doing this as a community and we're doing this together. So let's figure out a way to make it work for everybody, that we can all be on the same page. And that's been really, really great.
I have felt before in this community, like this is so not the right thing I want to, well, people pee on their territory. Typically, like, this is my little project or scope or circle, and so I'm not going to be inclusive, and so the competition factor. So I have seen that too in a lot of different areas. How do you want to speak to any current gaps or in our current education or preparedness for an event like this? Were you guys who had a pandemic plan for
Right. I don't know. I mean, I really think for those providers that were already set up for telehealth, they're probably the ones that have managed this the best. For the schools, like, online education isn't really new either. It is for, obviously, younger grades and that kind of stuff. So I think they are certainly doing the best that they can. And I think every week has really been a little bit more trial and error. But it does seem, like I said, that they're in the groove now, and kids are actually attending and completing homework and doing that kind of stuff. And I mean, I'm not sure because I'm not on that side.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that they are in pretty consistent planning phases, right? They're assessing kind of how things have gone and what they need to change, and they have been making those changes. So I think they had a pretty solid plan. And as things change or grow or whatever it is, they have been able to um, kind of assess that in a different way that seems to be effective. I mean, like I said, the clients that I have and other clinicians, because attendance isn't really as big of an issue, I do think that there's quite a few kids that are actually succeeding quite well in this environment.
For you personally, what's been the most difficult adjustment to your professional and personal life due to this COVID-19?
Zoom fatigue, for sure. It's I'm really excited when a clinician wants to do supervision over the phone instead of over Zoom, because I'm like, oh, okay, thank goodness I can kind of breathe, right? But I think that is the hard part is you go from meeting to meeting because you don't have the travel, and like the travel was a good thing for me too when I was seeing clients at schools, because it gave me that separation, and then also kind of like being able to switch into, okay, this is the client that I'm meeting now. You don't really get that separation unless you plan it. And so I think it's been a test too for boundaries for clinicians and that kind of stuff. And because they're not like at work all day or at school all day, then now all day they're available, or all weekend they're available, because it's the same as it is on the weekday.
Yeah.
And there's not really that separation, which I have fallen just in line with, of, yep, it's just any other day. So whether I schedule on Saturday or I schedule on Monday, it's basically the same. So just reminding myself, right? I'm like, okay, I still gotta keep this. And then right before the pandemic hit, our program supervisor at Griffith left so I have also been filling the program supervisor position during all of this. And I think that has certainly been the hardest part in trying to maintain my boundaries current position, and also making sure that they're not requiring me to do 14 different jobs instead of So I do think, and not just for me but professionally, I think it's been a test of boundaries for sure. And like, the client says, hey, I have time, do you have time right now? It's easy to say yes.
Yeah.
Because what do I need to do, right? I just need to go into the office. But then remembering, like, there's a reason that you schedule things, and not just, I'm going to do it whenever, right away. Because then you don't feel as prepared.
And you just burn out. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Tell me about your creative
creative directions.
Creative directions.
Yeah, so it's creative directions, counseling and consulting. And like I said, it's essentially another mental health practice that contracts with clinicians to provide services. I will say, so I've been working on getting it kind of up and going, and COVID has kind of given me the opportunity to open that early, because I can't look at offices, right? So, but because everything is telehealth, I don't have to focus on that part, right? I'm able to focus on meeting the needs of the clients instead of where this office is going to be and what that's going to look like, and all of that stuff. So it has kind of given me the ability to open it earlier than I was anticipating. And like we accept Medicaid. Rocky Mountain's been really great. And Blue Cross has been really helpful. So it's nice too to to get the support of these insurance agencies as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very nice. Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think the weird part for me is that I do provide supervision to clinicians, and then I also support interns. And so interns, depending on what school they're at, have different rules. So some of them cannot do face-to-face right now. Some of them are able to under these specific situations. Some have considered not continuing over the summer through their practicum or their internship. So it's been a lot of coordination too with universities and what that looks like for each of the interns.
So do you actually sit in the meeting with the intern and whoever they're meeting with?
Yeah, so I do have.
Or do they just debrief with you?
No, most of it's through
like?
email.
Oh, okay.
With the school and just kind of their updates, and then they do have essentially like webinars that they provide depending on the school and how often that is, but usually we're at least connecting once a quarter anyways, and so it's just kind of keeping in line with that. And then the clinicians that are doing parenting time and then the clinicians that are doing therapy, there's just the rules, not rules I guess, but the guidelines we'll say are different for each of them, and so it's really interesting to see which box they all fit into, and making sure that this clinician is following their school and this clinician is following DHS. And so yeah, it's interesting, and it seems like the universities are going to continue in the fall with new practicum and new internships. It'll be interesting to see if that actually happens, just because I don't know what's going to happen next week, let alone a couple of months.
Yeah, one program that, we have medical students that come from the University of Colorado, and they go on rotations, probably similar to what your interns do. And the university pulled them all back when COVID hit. So they had to rush back to their university, and they're just barely now starting to let them come back out and get into the community and get into clinics with docs and start learning again. So, and we'll see what happens if, we have a resurgence, I don't know, a spike, I guess, in cases, what it will look like, what Colorado will do, what Mesa County will do, what our nation will do, who knows.
Yeah, and I think that's been like the interesting part too, is Griffith is Colorado wide, and so the main offices are in Denver, and so Denver has a very different like safer at home or stay at home than Mesa County does. And so it's that interesting I don't know, like mesh of providing services based on the home site, and then also how Grand Junction is different. And I think in that part, the community has really come together really strongly, and I think that's been super great. I think as a whole, Colorado feels more disconnected to me now because of that, right? Because everybody is doing something differently instead
now that
of
we're in safer at home.
Yeah, instead of this is what we're doing as a state. It's county by county or city by city, and so it feels disconnected with the state and more connected with the community. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. Well, only time will tell what's going to happen.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
Of course. Thanks for thinking of me. And I don't know, it's just cool. It's interesting to get all these different inputs from the different providers, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that are really similar, and
there are
certain things obviously that are different. Overall though, I imagine we're all kind of struggling with the same thing or impacted in very similar ways.
Yeah, we are. Awesome. Well, thanks, lady.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.